I knew what I was going to say the moment I saw her name on my phone. 18 years. 18 years of silence. And now this. My thumb hovered over the green button. Part of me wanted to let it ring out, to let her feel the same emptiness I'd felt every birthday, every Christmas, every Father's Day that came and went without a word. But I answered, I don't know why. Maybe because I'm 63 years old and tired of carrying anger like luggage. Or maybe because I'd been preparing for this moment longer than I cared to admit. Hello, Rebecca. There was a pause on the other end, a small intake of breath. Dad? Oh my God, Dad, you answered. Her voice cracked in a way that might have broken me once. Might have made me forget the years of returned letters, the graduation invitation I'd sent that came back marked, Return to Sender, the hospital stay after my heart attack when she never called. Never checked if I was even alive. But that was the old Walter. The Walter who drove trucks for 36 years and came home to an empty apartment that smelled like microwave dinners and regret. The Walter who'd watched his marriage dissolve because, according to Diane, a real man provided more than just steady paychecks and clean laundry. The Walter who'd lost his daughter to a sales manager with a company car and promises of a better life in Columbus. I wasn't sure you'd pick up, Rebecca said. I've been wanting to call for so long. I looked out the window of my modest rental in Akron. The same view I'd had for 17 years. The oak tree in the parking lot had grown thick and solid, just like the portfolio I'd been building in silence. Funny how things grow when you're not paying attention. How patience compounds. 18 years is a long time to want something, I said. I know, and I'm sorry, Dad. I was so young when Mom and I left, and things were complicated. Complicated. That was one word for it. Another word was calculated. Diane had been strategic in her separation, making sure Rebecca heard every complaint, every justification for why leaving me was not just necessary but virtuous, how I'd worked too much, how I didn't have ambition, how Frank, her new husband, understood what it meant to really live. I'd tried. God knows I'd tried. Every weekend I had visitation rights. I drove the 2 hours to Columbus, took Rebecca to her favorite restaurants, to movies, to the science center she loved. But Diane was always there in the background, her presence like smoke, seeping into everything. By the time Rebecca was 16, she'd stopped answering my calls. By 18, she'd blocked my number. And I'd let her go, not because I didn't love her, but because I'd learned something in my years on the road. You can't force someone to stay. You can only control what you do with the miles ahead. Why now? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I saw the article in the Plain Dealer about you. There it was. The reason for the call, crystal clear as the Ohio winter. 3 weeks ago, a local reporter had gotten wind of my story somehow. Former truck driver who'd invested his modest savings in Bitcoin back in 2013, when it was worth pocket change and everyone thought it was either a scam or the future. I'd read about it in a technology magazine I'd picked up at a truck stop, and something about it had made sense to me. The idea of a currency that didn't depend on banks or governments, that existed in some digital space beyond the reach of people like Diane's fancy lawyers. I'd put in $3,000, every spare dollar I had, watched it climb to 5,000, then 8, then crash back down to 2. Held on anyway. Added another 1,000 when I got my tax return, then another. For years I watched that number in my account like it was a secret language only I could read. By 2017, that initial investment had turned into 90,000. By 2020, 350,000. And last year, when Bitcoin hit its peak, I'd sold most of it. $2.3 million in my bank account, minus taxes. Enough to never work again if I didn't want to. Enough to change everything. But I hadn't changed anything. I still lived in my one-bedroom apartment. Still drove my 2015 Honda Civic. Still ate breakfast at the same diner on Sunday mornings. The only difference was the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd made it on my own terms, without anyone's permission or approval. The reporter had called it a blue-collar Bitcoin miracle. The story had been picked up by a few other Ohio papers. Someone had found my photo from the trucking company's 20-year service award and printed it next to a picture of me now. Same plaid shirts, different wisdom in the eyes. You saw the article, I repeated. Dad, I had no idea. All these years, I thought. Mom always said you were barely getting by, that you could hardly afford child support. Something cold settled in my chest. I paid every month. On time. Sometimes early. I know I mean, I believe you. It's just, can we talk, please? I'd really like to see you. It's been so long and I miss you. I'd imagined this moment for years. The apology that would come too late. The explanation that would explain nothing. But I'd also spent those years learning something valuable. The difference between being wanted and being needed. The difference between love and opportunity. Thanksgiving, I said. You're welcome to come here for Thanksgiving. Just you. Oh. Another pause. Actually, I was hoping. Mom's been wanting to reconnect too. She's been going through a rough time, and she thought maybe we could all... Just you, Rebecca. Or not at all. Silence on the line. Long enough that I could hear the calculation happening, the quick math of whether I was worth the effort without Diane as a buffer. Okay, she said finally. Just me. Can I bring Marcus? My son? Your grandson? A grandson. I had a grandson, and I'd never met him, never been told he existed. The anger flared hot and immediate, but I pushed it down. I'd learned to control fire over the years. How old? He just turned 5. Dad, he's wonderful. He has your eyes. 5 years old. 5 years of a life I'd missed. 5 birthdays, 5 Christmases. I thought of all the things I could have taught him, all the stories I could have told. All the love that had been dammed up inside me with nowhere to go. Bring him, I said. Thanksgiving. 4 o'clock. Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much. And Dad, I really am sorry. For everything. She hung up before I could respond. Maybe that was better. Maybe some things didn't need responses, just endings. I set the phone down and looked around my apartment. The furniture was the same I'd bought at a thrift store 15 years ago. The TV was old enough to be thick. The only luxury I'd allowed myself was a good mattress, because after decades of sleeping in a truck cab, I'd figured my back deserved at least that much. But now, sitting in the afternoon light streaming through my kitchen window, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the kind that comes from work or routine, but the kind that comes from unfinished business. I opened my laptop and started to research. If Rebecca wanted to reconnect, I needed to understand why. And I needed to understand what had happened to her in the 18 years since she'd disappeared from my life. What I found didn't surprise me, but it did confirm my suspicions. Rebecca Holloway, formerly Rebecca Hartman, married at 23 to a man named David Holloway. Divorced at 29, working as a receptionist at a dental office in Columbus, living in a small apartment in a decent but not expensive neighborhood, no social media presence to speak of, which was unusual for someone her age. A few photos showed her looking tired, older than her 30 years, and in those photos, a little boy with dark hair and yes, my eyes. I kept digging, found Diane's trail easily enough. She'd married Frank Peterson, the sales manager, 3 months after our divorce was finalized. They'd lived well for a while, or at least appeared to. Nice house in Upper Arlington. Country club membership. Rebecca in private school for a few years. Then things had shifted. Frank's company had downsized in 2015. They'd sold the big house, moved to something smaller. Diane had gone back to work as an office manager. Nothing scandalous, just the slow deflation of a life built on appearances. But there was something else, something that made my hands tighten on the keyboard. A scholarship fund. When Rebecca was 16, I'd set up a small education fund for her, $500 a month, automatically deposited into an account I'd opened in her name. I'd kept it going even after she'd stopped talking to me, because I'd figured that someday she'd need it, someday she'd understand. By the time she turned 18, there should have been nearly $15,000 in that account. Enough for a year or two at a state school, at least. I'd never heard if she'd used it. Never knew if she'd even found out about it. I made a phone call to the bank. It took 3 transfers and 20 minutes of hold music, but eventually I got an answer. The account had been emptied. Every penny. In June 2012, 2 months after Rebecca's 18th birthday. Withdrawn in a single transaction by the account's co-signer, Diane Hartman Peterson. I hung up and sat in the stillness of my apartment. The anger I'd been holding back rose up like a tide, hot and righteous. Diane had taken the money I'd saved for our daughter's education. Money I'd earned driving through ice storms and heat waves, through holidays and anniversaries, through every mile of highway between here and everywhere else. And Rebecca had probably never known it existed. For the first time in 18 years, I felt something crystallize inside me. Not just anger, but clarity. I'd thought I'd moved past the need for vindication, for justice. I'd thought I'd found peace in my simple life and my quiet success. But maybe some debts needed to be paid. Maybe some lies needed to be exposed. Maybe some fathers needed to teach one final lesson about the cost of betrayal. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of planning. I made phone calls, sent emails, hired a private investigator named Sarah Chen who specialized in financial forensics. I was careful, methodical, every step documented, every fact verified. I wasn't going to build a case on assumptions. What Sarah found was worse than I'd imagined. The scholarship fund was just the beginning. Diane had also claimed me on her taxes as paying less child support than I actually had, getting her earned income credits she wasn't entitled to. She'd told Rebecca I'd refused to help with college, that I'd said education was wasted on her. She'd fabricated an entire narrative of abandonment and neglect. And Frank? Frank had lost his job not due to downsizing, but due to embezzlement charges that had been quietly settled. They'd mortgaged and remortgaged the house, burned through credit cards, taken out loans from family members they'd never repaid. Rebecca had married David Holloway at 23, probably desperate to escape the instability of her mother's life. The marriage had lasted 6 years before he'd left her for someone else, leaving her with a 3-year-old son and a mountain of debt he'd racked up in her name. My daughter had been failed by everyone who was supposed to love her. Her mother, her stepfather, her husband. And she probably thought I'd failed her too. But I hadn't. I'd been there, trying for as long as she'd let me. And when she'd shut me out, I'd still made sure there was something waiting for her when she needed it. Diane had stolen that from her. I sat at my kitchen table the night before Thanksgiving and looked at the file Sarah had put together. Bank statements, tax returns, copies of emails where Diane had lied to creditors, to family, to anyone who would listen. A pattern of manipulation and theft that stretched back decades. Tomorrow, Rebecca would come here with her son. She'd probably ask me for money, coached by Diane to play on my emotions. And I could give it to her. $2.3 million was more than enough for both of us. I could write a check and buy my way back into her life. But that wouldn't teach her anything. It wouldn't expose the rot at the center of her relationship with her mother. It wouldn't give her the truth she deserved. So I made a different plan. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and gray. I woke up early as I always did and made coffee. My hands were steady as I prepared the turkey, the same way my mother had taught me 50 years ago. Mashed potatoes, green beans, stuffing. Nothing fancy, but made with care. At 3:30, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rebecca standing there, bundled in a coat that had seen better days, holding the hand of a small boy with dark eyes and a serious expression. "Hi, Dad," she said. For a moment, all my plans disappeared. Because standing there was my little girl, the one who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car rides, who used to make me construction paper cards for Father's Day. She was older now, lines around her eyes, her hair shorter than I remembered, but she was still Rebecca. "Come in," I said. "It's cold out there." She stepped inside, and Marcus followed, staying close to her leg. He looked up at me with curiosity and uncertainty in equal measure. "Marcus, this is your grandpa," Rebecca said softly. "Hi," Marcus whispered. I knelt down to his level, my knees protesting. "Hi, Marcus. I'm very glad to meet you." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You have a lot of books." He was looking at my bookshelf, the one luxury I'd allowed myself over the years. Hundreds of books, everything from classic literature to science fiction to history. "I do," I said. "Do you like to read?" "Mom reads to me every night." I looked up at Rebecca, and she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "It's our thing," she said. "No matter how tired I am, we always read before bed." Something warm expanded in my chest. Whatever else had happened, Rebecca was a good mother. She'd broken the cycle. "Dinner's almost ready," I said, standing up. "Make yourselves comfortable." We ate at my small kitchen table, which I'd extended with a folding chair I'd borrowed from my neighbor. Marcus told me about kindergarten, about his best friend Jackson, about how he wanted to be a paleontologist when he grew up. Rebecca laughed at his stories, and for an hour it felt like we were just a family having Thanksgiving dinner. But then Marcus asked to watch a movie on my old TV, and Rebecca and I were alone at the table with our coffee and the remains of pumpkin pie. "Dad," she said, her voice quieter now, I need to talk to you about something. Here it was. The real reason for the visit. I'm listening. Things have been hard. Since David left, I'm working full-time, but daycare is expensive, and Marcus needs so much. And I heard about the money, about how well you're doing now, and I thought. She stopped, took a breath. I need help. I hate asking, but I'm drowning here. Mom said you'd probably help if I just asked. Mom said, I repeated. She's been trying to help too, but she and Frank are going through their own financial troubles. She suggested I reach out to you, that maybe we could reconnect, work something out. I set my coffee cup down carefully. When did Diane tell you about the scholarship fund I set up for you? Rebecca blinked. What scholarship fund? The one I opened when you were 16. $500 a month for 2 years. Should have been almost $15,000 by the time you turned 18. Her face went pale. I never heard about any scholarship fund. I know. Because your mother emptied it 2 months after you turned 18. She was the co-signer on the account. She took every penny. The color drained further from Rebecca's face. That's not. She wouldn't. I pulled out the folder Sarah had prepared, handed it across the table. Bank statements, all documented. The deposits I made. The single withdrawal she made. June 2012. Rebecca opened the folder with shaking hands. I watched her face as she read. Watched the disbelief turn to horror, turn to something harder, colder. She told me, Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper, that you refused to help with college. That she'd asked you, begged you, and you'd said I needed to learn to make my own way. I paid child support on time, every month, for 6 years. I set up that fund because I knew Diane wouldn't use the support money for your education. I wanted you to have something that was just for you. She used it to pay off credit cards, Rebecca said, still staring at the papers. She and Frank had a huge fight that summer about money. I remember because it was right before I left for community college. She said Frank had gotten them into debt, that they needed to consolidate, I thought. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I thought you didn't care about my future. I cared more than you'll ever know. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you fight for me? I tried, Rebecca. I called. I wrote. I drove to Columbus every chance I got. But you stopped answering. You blocked me. And at some point, I had to accept that maybe forcing my way into your life would only push you further away. So I waited. I hoped that someday you'd come back on your own terms. She was crying openly now, the kind of crying that comes from deep inside, from years of built-up pain and confusion and loss. She told me so many things, Rebecca said. She said you didn't want me, that you were relieved when we left, that you'd moved on and started a new life and didn't have room for me in it. None of that was true, not one word. Then why did she do it? Why did she lie? I'd asked myself that question 1,000 times over the years. Because it was easier than admitting she'd made a mistake. Easier than letting you see that maybe the life she'd promised with Frank wasn't everything she'd said it would be. If she made me the villain, she could be the hero. Simple as that. Rebecca wiped her eyes with her napkin. In the living room, I could hear the sounds of the movie Marcus was watching, some animated thing with talking animals. There's more in that folder, I said gently. Financial records showing how Diane misrepresented my child support payments on her taxes. How she and Frank took out loans using your name without your knowledge when you were 19. How she's been telling family members for years that I abandoned both of you while taking money I sent for your expenses. Rebecca kept reading, page after page. Her tears had stopped, replaced by something harder to watch. The death of an illusion. The moment when you realized that the person you trusted most in the world had been lying to you for decades. I came here to ask you for money, she said finally, setting the folder down. Mom said you owed it to me, that after all these years of not being there, the least you could do was help now. She even helped me plan what to say, how to approach you. I know. How did you know? Because I know Diane, and because I've had 18 years to get very good at reading between the lines. Rebecca laughed, but it was a broken sound. I'm such an idiot. I believed her. All these years I believed every word, and I kept you out of my life because of it. I kept Marcus from knowing his grandfather because I thought. She couldn't finish. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was small, cold, trembling. You were a child, I said. Children believe their parents. That's not stupidity. That's trust. She abused that trust, not you. What do I do now? She looked at me with those eyes that used to look at me like I could fix anything. How do I? God, I have to confront her. I have to tell her I know. You don't have to do anything right now. You don't owe her an immediate response. But I came here to ask you for money. She's expecting me to come back with a plan. With something. This was the moment I'd been planning for. The moment where I could exact my revenge, could turn Rebecca against Diane completely, could win, finally, after 18 years of losing. But looking at my daughter's devastated face, I realized something. This wasn't about winning. It never had been. Rebecca, I said carefully, I will help you, but not the way Diane expects, and not without conditions. She tensed. What conditions? First, you cut financial ties with your mother completely. She doesn't get to know what I give you or how much. She doesn't get to make plans for your future or tell you how to spend money I provide. That stops now. Rebecca nodded slowly. Okay. Second, you use whatever I give you to build actual stability. Not to pay off old debts from David or from Diane's schemes. Fresh start. That means working with a financial counselor I'll connect you with. Creating a budget. Making smart decisions. I can do that. Third, we rebuild our relationship. Not for the money, not because you feel guilty, but because you want to know me, and I want to know you and Marcus. That means honest conversations, even when they're hard. It means therapy if you need it to work through what Diane did. It means actual investment in being a family. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears again, but different tears this time. I want that. Dad, I've wanted that for so long, but I didn't know how to admit I'd been wrong. I didn't know how to come back after all these years of silence. You just did, I said. We sat there for a long moment, hands clasped across the table. In the living room, Marcus laughed at something in his movie. The sound was pure and sweet and uncomplicated. How much did she steal? Rebecca asked finally. The scholarship fund? The tax fraud? All of it? According to the forensic accountant I hired, approximately $38,000 over the years. Most of it from the fund. Some from tax credits, she claimed fraudulently. $38,000. Rebecca shook her head. That would have changed everything. I could have finished my bachelor's degree instead of dropping out. Marcus could have had a better start. I could have. Could have doesn't help us now, I said. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you $50,000. Not as payment for what Diane stole, but as a foundation for your future. $20,000 for Marcus's education fund, in an account only you control. $20,000 to clear any legitimate debt and create a 6-month emergency fund. $10,000 to cover therapy, financial counseling, and anything else you need to get stable. Rebecca's mouth opened, but no sound came out. But, I continued, you have to promise me something. You use this money to build a life, not to give Diane another chance to take from you. When you talk to her, and you will have to eventually, you don't tell her about this. You don't let her guilt you or manipulate you or convince you that she deserves a cut. What I give you is between us. Family business. Real family business. I promise, Rebecca whispered. I promise, Dad, and I'll pay you back. Someday, when I'm on my feet, This isn't a loan. It's what I should have been able to give you 18 years ago. What Diane stole from you. Consider us even. She came around the table and hugged me then, and I held my daughter for the first time in nearly 2 decades. She smelled like drugstore shampoo and coffee and something else. Something I remembered from when she was small. My little girl, who wasn't so little anymore, who'd been through hell and was still standing. Thank you, she said into my shoulder. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Mom? Why are you crying? Rebecca pulled back, wiping her eyes. Happy tears, baby. These are happy tears. Grandpa made you happy. Yes, she said, looking at me. Yes, he did. The rest of the evening passed in a different tone. We ate leftover pie. I showed Marcus my collection of National Geographic magazines from the 1,990 seconds, and his eyes went wide at the pictures of dinosaur fossils and deep-sea creatures. Rebecca told me about her job, about her dreams of maybe going back to school someday, about how hard and how good it was to be Marcus's mom. Before they left, I gave Rebecca the folder to take home. Everything documented, everything proven. Evidence she could use however she needed to, whether that meant confronting Diane or simply understanding what had happened. "What are you going to do?" she asked at the door. "About Mom? Are you going to, I don't know, press charges or something?" "That's up to you," I said. "It's your relationship with her. Your choice how to handle it. I'm done letting Diane take up space in my head. I got what I wanted tonight." "What's that?" "My daughter back." She hugged me again, fierce and tight. Marcus hugged my leg, which was about as high as he could reach. After they left, I stood in my quiet apartment and looked around at my simple life. The thrift store furniture, the old TV, the books, and the kitchen table, and the view of the oak tree. It had been enough for 18 years. But now, for the first time since Diane left, it felt like more than enough. It felt like the foundation of something new. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca and I talked nearly every day. Short calls at first, feeling each other out, learning how to be in each other's lives again. I met her financial counselor, a sharp woman named Patricia who helped Rebecca set up a budget and a plan. I opened Marcus's education fund and made Rebecca the sole trustee. And Rebecca confronted Diane. She didn't tell me the details at first, just that it had been done. But eventually, late one night over the phone, she told me what had happened. Diane had denied everything at first, called the documents forgeries, called me vengeful, called Rebecca ungrateful, but when faced with official bank records and tax returns, she'd crumbled, made excuses, said she'd planned to pay it back, said she'd done what she had to do to survive Frank's mistakes. Rebecca had told her the same thing I'd told Rebecca. The past was done, but the future would be different. Diane was welcome to have a relationship with her daughter and grandson, but it would be honest. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more money flowing from Rebecca to support Diane's lifestyle. Diane had called me after that conversation, left a voicemail full of accusations and justifications and blame. I'd listened to it once, then deleted it. Some people never learned. Some people would rather be right than be loved. But that wasn't my problem anymore. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, I made a decision. I sold my apartment building, yes. I'd bought the building I'd been renting from 5 years earlier, when the owner had gotten sick and needed to liquidate and move to a small house 3 blocks from Rebecca's apartment in Columbus. It had 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, and a porch where Marcus and I could sit and read his dinosaur books on summer evenings. It wasn't much, but it was close to family. Real family. I'd spent 18 years learning to be alone, learning that I could survive without the people I loved most, learning that I could build something meaningful even in the absence of connection. But I'd also learned that survival wasn't the same as living, that you could be comfortable and empty at the same time. That revenge was less satisfying than reconciliation, and that money meant nothing if you had no one to share your life with. Rebecca paid for her own therapy, used the money I'd given her to finish her bachelor's degree, taking night classes while Marcus was with me. Within 2 years, she'd moved from receptionist to office manager to, eventually, practice administrator at a dental clinic. She paid off her debts, built her savings, created the stable life she'd always deserved. And Marcus? Marcus learned that grandfathers were good for reading stories and bad jokes and patient answers to endless questions about whether velociraptors could have beaten T-Rexes in a fight. Diane eventually apologized in her way. Said she'd made mistakes, said she'd been under pressure, said she hoped we could all move forward. Rebecca accepted the apology but maintained her boundaries. Some wounds healed, some just scarred over. As for me, I found something I hadn't expected in those last years before retirement: purpose. I started volunteering at a literacy center, teaching adults to read. Started a small fund for children whose parents couldn't afford educational expenses. Started living like I had more to give than just money. The story could have ended with revenge, with me exposing Diane's lies at that Thanksgiving dinner, humiliating her in front of Rebecca, claiming my vindication after 18 years of silence. But real life isn't about winning or losing. It's about what you build with the time you have left. It's about choosing connection over being right. It's about learning that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well and loving better. I'd spent $2 million on a simple life and gotten nothing in return. Then I'd spent $50,000 on my daughter's future and gotten everything. That's the thing about wealth most people never understand. It's not about the size of your bank account or the car in your driveway or the house you live in. It's about knowing at the end of the day that you have enough, and that the people you love know they have enough too. I'd been waiting 18 years for my daughter to come home. Turned out, I just needed to be patient enough to be there when she was ready, and worth waiting for when she arrived.